President, good evening. I colleagues here as we finish the last series of votes, and we're talking about the range of difficult issues that we face in this Congress and also in our country. Issues that include ISIS, what to do about them to confront this latest threat, whether or not to provide aid to the moderate rebels in Syria, and what form should that aid take. Continued concerns that flow from the Ukraine and the areas there along the border with Russia. Cyber attacks, data breaches, Ebola outbreaks, folks trying to get into our country from all different directions, especially from Central America. These are hard issues. These are hard issues to deal with. And try though we may, it's hard to fix them. And as my colleague knows, who serves with us on the Homeland Security Government Affairs, it's a busy neighborhood where we have jurisdiction. And some of these, it's not that the problems are intractable, they are just hard issues. And some of them may take years to fully resolve. But there's, and I might say as well, the economy, the economic recovery has continued now for, 5 years. And it's been start and go, stop and go. And every now and then we have some very encouraging news, and sometimes it's less so. But today we got some encouraging news. I want to mention this as I talk a little bit about the economy and lead into a discussion of where the postal system of our country actually plays a role in strengthening our economic recovery. But every Thursday, my colleague knows, the Department of Labor puts out information. And among the things they promulgate on Thursdays is how many people file for unemployment insurance in the last week. They do this every Thursday, except maybe on Thanksgiving or maybe on a Christmas. On the Thursday of the week that Barack Obama and Joe Biden were sworn in as president and vice president, that week they put out a number that said 628,000 people. 628,000 people file for unemployment insurance. Anytime that number is above 400,000 people, we're losing jobs in this country. And anytime it's under 400,000 people, we're adding jobs in this country. It was 628,000 that week, 5.5 years ago. Slowly but surely, that number has dropped and has continued to drop. It bounces up and down a little bit. And what we do, because it may go up or down from week to week, what we do is we do a 4-week running average. And that kind of balances out the blips. Well, the number has dropped from 628,000 people 5.5 years ago to 400,000 people and to 300,000 people. We got the new report today from the Department of Labor, and 280,000 people filed last week for unemployment insurance. Why should we feel good about that? Because that number, that's about, I think, the lowest we've been below 400,000 since the recession actually began, certainly in the last 5.5 years. And that would suggest that it's kind of a forerunner of what will come in the job numbers for the month of September, which we'll get at the beginning of October. I'm encouraged by that. And there's a number of things that we can do and ought to do to continue to strengthen the economic recovery. I won't go into all those, but one of them I want to mention deals with the Postal Service. Not everybody says, well, the Postal Service has much to do with the economy. Well, as it does. There are about 7 or 8 million jobs in the United States that depend, to one extent or the other, on having an efficient, vibrant Postal Service. And for a number of years, the Postal Service has been struggling, in some cases, to survive. The Postal Service has cut in order to try to right-size their enterprise. In the last 10 or so years, they've reduced their headcount from, I want to say, about almost 900,000 people to about 500,000 people, almost cut it in half. They reduced the number of mail processing centers across the country from, I think, about, 600,000, about 600 or 700 mail processing centers to actually less than half that, a little over 300. They have we have close to 40,000 post offices, 40,000 post offices across the country. And over 10,000 of those today. They didn't really close post offices. What they did is a bunch of closed post offices where they didn't do much business. Those post offices are still open in many cases, but they are open maybe 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours a day, rather than 8 hours a day with a fully paid postmaster. And so they found a way to not close a lot of post offices, but to reduce their costs there. They're still struggling. They're still struggling. Every 3 months, they put out their financial reports, and financial reports indicate that they're either losing money or maybe close to breaking even. Well, as our presiding officer knows, this is an issue that I've thought about a whole lot. He does too. Senator from Alaska, they care a lot about the Postal Service, and the needs for a strong, vibrant Postal Service in Alaska are probably as greater than any state in the country. He's done a great job, along with his colleague from Alaska, to try to make sure that we're mindful in the Senate of the importance of the Postal Service to Alaska. I got a glass of water here. Someone in one of their pages was good enough to bring it to me. You look at this glass of water. It's not really clear, is this glass of water half full or half empty? I think most people thinking about the Postal Service in the last several years would say, this glass of water is half empty. And as time goes by, I'm starting to think maybe that's the wrong approach. That's the wrong opinion. And I think this glass of water might actually be half full. And as the more I learn about the Postal Service's operations and the opportunities that they face, I'm more and more convinced that the opportunity here, this is a glass half full situation. The real challenge, and we've had, gosh, over the years, probably a dozen or more hearings in the Senate on the Postal Service. The real challenge is, how do we take a 200-plus-year-old legacy organization, legacy distribution network that takes the Postal Service to every mailbox in the country 5 or 6 days a week? How do we take that legacy distribution network and enable the Postal Service, empower the Postal Service to make money, to be profitable in the 21st century? We don't communicate, as we know, like we used to in this country. We have the internet, and we have Skype, and we have Twitter, we have, cell phones. We have just a lot of different ways to communicate that we didn't have even 12, 15 years ago. And folks used to send birthday cards, Christmas cards, and that sort of thing. They send email cards, or if they send anything at all. People used to write letters and notes and so forth. My parents in World War II, they wrote to each other almost every day. People don't do that much anymore. We have folks over in Afghanistan. They have email, they have Skype, they have cell phones, and they still send some letters, but it's not like it used to be. A lot of businesses who used the mail to do billings and for people to send in their remittances, they don't do that anymore. First-class mail in this country, where the Postal Service has made their money for many years. That's where the most profitable source of income is first-class mail. We've seen since the Great Recession started in 2007, we've seen first-class mail drop by almost half. And that has caused huge problems for the Postal Service going forward. Well, while the internet and the digital age has taken away a lot of the Postal Service's business, it's also given them, as it turns out, some pretty good opportunities. And as we know, not everybody goes to a department store these days to buy something, or to a hardware store, or to a bookstore. And a lot of us buy things, not every day, but a lot of times, we'll buy it over the internet. And those items, whether they're gifts or just things that we might want for ourselves, they have somehow to get from the manufacturer or the retailer, their distribution center, got to get to the customer somehow. Somebody's got to deliver it. And as it turns out, that somebody could be FedEx, it could be UPS. In many cases, it can be the Postal Service. And Mr. President, I want to take just a few minutes and talk this evening about how I really do think for the Postal Service, this can be a glass half full situation. And part of our responsibility here in the U.S. Senate is to make sure they're able to seize this day, seize this opportunity, and not let it pass by. The Postal Service has been calling for us to do a number of things to help them, not to give them money, but to do a number of things that would help them. I'll just mention a few of them. The Postal Service is overpaid by about $2.5 billion what they owe to the federal employee retirement system, $2.5 billion. And given the formula that's used, which does not take into account that postal employees are older and die sooner than than other federal employees, the Postal Service is going to continue to overpay their monies that they owe to the Federal Employee Retirement System. So they're owing a $2.5 billion refund, and if we don't do something, they're going to continue to overpay and be owed the refunds going forward. We should first get them the $2.5 billion refund. The second thing we should do is change the formula so that it reflects the demographics of the Postal Service versus the rest of the federal workforce. Among the other things that we ought to do is to integrate, if you will, Medicare, better integrate Medicare with the cost of health care for postal employees. My wife turned 65 earlier this summer. When she did, the company she worked for 27 years, DuPont, mailed her something and said, we still love you. You're retired, you're 65, and we want you to sign up for Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, and Medicare Part D, and we will in turn, provide wraparound or fill the gap healthcare coverage for you. They do that for all the retirees when they reach 65. And it's not just DuPont, it's thousands of companies all over the country. When their retirees reach the age of 65, for the most part, they say to the retirees, okay, you're eligible for Medicare, Part A, Part B, Part D. We want you to sign up, and we'll provide the wraparound coverage for you. FedEx, I believe, does that. UPS, I believe, does that. The Postal Service, which competes in the same business as both FedEx and UPS, and frankly, some of these other companies, FedEx doesn't do that. The Postal Service pays more money, as it turns out, into Medicare than any employer in the country. I'll say that again. Postal Service pays more money into the Medicare Trust Fund than any employer in the country. They do not get full value for the dollars that they've invested. And one of the things the Postal Service has asked us to do, as simply a matter of equity, is to allow them to do what so many other companies do, including, I believe, some of the companies that they compete directly with, FedEx and UPS. We ought to do that. That's one of the things they're asking us to do. Another thing, under the current law, from time to time, if there's something that happens in the economy or there's a disaster, and the Postal Service needs to raise rates on a kind of an emergency basis, we call it an exigent basis, they can apply to the Postal Regulatory Commission, ask to do that. Postal Regulatory Commission can say yes or they can say no. Last year, the Postal Service went to the Postal Regulatory Commission, said, you know, we suffered terribly because of the loss of first-class mail that flowed from this, the worst recession since the Great Depression. We would like to have something above and beyond a CPI increase, cost of living increase for our rates. And so what did the Postal Regulatory Commission do? They agreed to raise the rates, or let the Post Office raise the rates. It works out to about a 4.3% increase. Not permanent, but for a period of time, maybe a year. And the Postal Service is asking us to make that 4.3% increase their new revenue baseline, to make it permanent, not temporary, but to make it permanent. What does that mean for mailers if we would make it permanent? For folks that are like the nonprofit, all of us get mail from nonprofit organizations. This is part of the way they provide services to all kinds of folks. But the cost of a letter from a nonprofit entity goes from under this exigent rate case, 4.3% increase, has gone from 10 cents a letter to 11 cents. It's gone up by 1 penny. The cost of mailing a magazine, I believe, is also going up by either 1 or 2 pennies. It's something like from 25 cents to maybe 27 cents. The cost of mailing a catalog has gone up by 1 or 2 cents, I think maybe from 45 cents to 47 cents. And that's with a 4.3% increase. And what the Postal Service has said to the Congress is allow that temporary 4.3% increase, allow that to remain and to become part of our revenue baseline. I think we should do that. I know a number of my colleagues do as well. That's one of the things they're asking us to do. Among the other things they're asking us to do, they want to actually deliver things that some things they haven't been able to deliver before. Among them, wine, beer, spirits. FedEx can do that, UPS can do that, Postal services in many other countries can do that. Our Postal Service cannot do that. It's not going to balance their budget for them, but it'll make a big difference. It could be worth a couple $100 million a year, I believe, in profitability. That's something they'd like to be able to do. There are a couple of, FedEx is not interested in being Google or Apple or anybody like that, part of the digital economy. But there are a couple of things that they can do and would like to do that would sort of work into the digital economy. And they're not big deals, but they make sense, I think, with respect to the Postal Service and their capabilities. And it would actually, I think, enable them over time to make some revenues as well. The Postal Service delivers in initially Oregon, later Washington State, and this year in Colorado. They deliver ballots. People can file to vote, get absentee ballots, and vote by mail in Oregon. They do it in Washington State. This year, they're starting to do it in Colorado. What we've learned by experience is folks who can vote by mail, they vote more often. They vote more frequently. And what we hear from states that do this is actually it's a cost-effective way to run elections. And the Postal Service would like to do some more of that, and I think we should encourage that as well. Another area where the Postal Service might have some opportunities to do something, they would like to co-locate more operations with state and local governments in small communities where they have space at the post office, and get state and local folks to locate some activities there. One idea that they have, I think it's a great idea, in some of the bigger, more densely populated places around the country, the Postal Service has opened up large facilities, not like a regular post office, but a large facility where people can go get passports. They got one big facility just out in the outskirts of LA where in the course of the day, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people or more, families can come and get their passports. It's a service that's provided. The Postal Service makes some revenues from doing that. And if we ever pass comprehensive immigration reform, and we have 10 million or so people in this country who are here undocumented, and immigration reform doesn't give them the rights of citizenship, doesn't make it a citizen. But and I think the Senate-passed immigration reform bill would offer an opportunity for people to try to have some kind of legal status. How are they going to get that? Where are they going to get that? Well, if we pass immigration reform, there would be an opportunity for the Postal Service, which is in every community in our nation, which already does passport business for a lot of people. They could help meet that need, and my hope is they'll have that opportunity. Those are some things that they are asking us to do. And in short, what they're asking us to do is give them the ability to generate revenues and to be able to meet their capital needs. The Postal Service needs to be, if you will, recapitalized. They need one thing, they need new vehicles. They got 190,000 vehicles. And got this chart here that this is 2014, and we're down here about 10 years down the road. But what we're looking for is to provide, over this 10-year period of time, the Postal Service is saying, you know, we need about $30 billion to recapitalize the post office and to make them competitive. And one of the big ways is with respect to vehicles. They got 190,000 vehicles. The average age is 22 years. I have a 13-year-old Chrysler Town & Country minivan. I drove it down here yesterday from Wilmington, Delaware. I usually take the train. The train was down. It was like 2 days ago. Drove home last night, and just went over 377,000 miles. They got most of their vehicles. They're not 13 years old like my minivan. They're like almost twice as old, and they have easily twice as much mileage as my minivan. My wife thinks I ought to trade in my minivan. Someday I will. But we really should give the Postal Service the wherewithal to trade up, and not just to get a whole generation of new, more energy-efficient vehicles that maybe get twice the fuel economy, but also reduce emissions, but also vehicles that are right-sized for the kind of things that the Postal Service is delivering today. The Postal Service, the great opportunity for the digital economy for the Postal Service is they're delivering a lot more packages and parcels of all kinds. They're delivering groceries, even today, in a number of places around the country. And they need vehicles that are really sized in a different way and maybe more ergonomically appropriate as well for the folks that are driving the vehicles. There's new technology. Anybody buy a new car lately, you know the kind of technology they have on the vehicles. That's amazing what we can do with them. I wouldn't know that given the age of my vehicle, but my friends tell me the amazing things they can do with theirs. When you got a vehicle that's 22 years old, I want to tell you, there's not many gee whiz technology items on those vehicles, but there could be. There could be. And just an example, let's say my desk here, we'll say this defines an area for delivery of a rural letter carrier in some place around the country. It could be Alaska, it could be Delaware. And as the rural letter carrier covers this area, if, the technology is available so that the residents somewhere along there could say, pick up a package here, or leave this package at the general store. They could do any number of ways to communicate with their customers and provide better customer service. That's an easy thing. And the other thing is you walk into a post office these days, for the most part, they look today like they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, with some exceptions. There's so many things that we could do in terms of technology and provide better service at post offices that we're not doing. Provide better, quicker, more efficient service, friendlier service as well. The other thing I would mention, we got about 325 mail processing centers in the country. I visited one of them in the Senator Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota about 3 or 4 months ago. And we visited a small mail processing center in her beautiful state. And we went into the back operating area of the mail processing center. And there was a fellow there, he's probably 50-some years old, and he was lugging around these big boxes that they were mailing. Somebody had mailed, and he's carrying around and trying to get them over to a barcode reader and then put them in a huge, not a knapsack, but a big pouch, so they could be mailed. There's equipment that can readily process big boxes like that, smaller packages and parcels, and we don't have it in most of our mail processing centers. And we could, if we did, we could offer better, faster, timelier, more cost-effective service. And so if, in recapitalizing the Postal Service, among the things that the Postal Service could do, if they had $30 billion over the next 10 years, is replace their fleet of 190,000 vehicles with more energy-efficient vehicles, appropriately sized for the kind of packages they deliver. The 300 and some mail processing centers could be retooled with mail processing equipment that actually reflects what the Postal Service delivers in the 21st century. The post offices themselves could have the kind of upgrades in technology investments that would enable for better service as well. That's what the Postal Service could do if they had the money. Now, sometimes people think of the Postal Service and they think, well, the Postal Service doesn't come up with they're not really innovative. They don't come up with a whole bunch of ideas. Well, actually, as it turns out, they're getting to be more innovative than I thought they were, and a lot of other people. And I just want to mention a couple things that they've begun doing that are, I think, noteworthy, and they ought to be able to do more of them. And if they did, they could actually make money and maybe have the money to do these kind of capital investments and not be a burden to the taxpayers of this country. This morning in San Francisco, California, Mr. President, at about 3 a.m. this morning, in 32 zip codes, the U.S. Postal Service delivered groceries to people in 32 zip codes. Took them to homes, in some cases maybe to businesses, they took them to apartments, they took them to high-rises, and they deliver the groceries. They also deliver the mail later in the day, but from 3 a.m. this morning to 7 a.m. this morning, the Postal Service in those 32 zip codes delivered groceries. They've been doing it for over a month now. I understand that, and they're doing it for Amazon. I understand Amazon's real pleased with it, and the Postal Service is real pleased with it. Amazon, their customers like it, and the Postal Service can do this and make money. They're not doing anything else with the trucks from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., and it just works. It just works. Postal Service, you think, well, they say, well, we'll just see if we can do this more for Amazon. You know what they're doing? They're reaching out to 100 grocery chains across the country and saying, here's what we're doing for Amazon in San Francisco. How'd you like for us to do this for you? And you know what? My guess is this is going to turn into a pretty good piece of business. But they need the vehicles to enable them to do this sort of thing. And they need revenues in order to be able to have money for capital investment. Another thing that, some people think the only thing the Postal Service has done creatively in years is flat rate boxes. If it fits, it ships. That's a great product. It's still growing. It's growing by 4 or 5% per year. But there's a bunch of other things they can do and want to do and are beginning to do. They need the money for the capital investment. Another thing that they started doing, about a year ago. It's about a year ago they started delivering for Amazon, not everywhere, but maybe in a couple hundred zip codes, and on Sundays, and worked pretty well. And this past Sunday they delivered packages and parcels for Amazon, not to 200 zip codes, but I think to over 5,000 across the country, and it enables for next day delivery that includes Sundays. It's a nice piece of business, and it's one that's growing. But in order to continue to grow it, the Postal Service needs vehicles that are right-sized for that sort of business, and a lot of them, potentially a lot of them. One other thing that the Postal Service is doing, and I think is a piece of, it's a product that I think I've used, and a product that is going to have, I think, a growing utilization across the country. It's called Priority Mail Express. Priority Mail Express. And when I went to a post office in Delaware not long ago, I wanted to send something to my sister. Actually, I think it was a Mother's Day gift for her. And I said, I want this to get there in 2 days. And they asked, do you want it insured? And I said, not really. And they said, well, if you send it by Priority Mail Express, we can guarantee delivery in 2 days. We can guarantee delivery in 1 day, or we can guarantee delivery in 3 days. We can track it for you for free. And the first, I think they said $100 of insurance is free. I said, well, this is great. I'll take 2 days. The insurance is fine. Give me the insurance, and we'll be on our way. That's great. As it turns out, I'm not the only person who's using Priority Mail Express. It's available not just 1 day a week. It's not available 2 or 3 days a week. It's available to deliver 7 days a week. Somebody has something they want to mail this Saturday and have it delivered on Sunday, they can do so Priority Mail Express. And they can do it and get next day delivery. They can do it and have free tracking. They can do it and have insurance up to, I don't know, $50 or $100 on whatever's being mailed. That is going to be a great product. I think it's going to make flat rate boxes, well, not look like a second-class citizen, but it's going to make flat rate boxes look modest by comparison. Those are the sorts of things that our folks at the Postal Service would like to do, to deliver not just the mail, to deliver groceries, to be able to deliver this stuff like tomorrow, to be able to deliver it on Sunday. And it's ironic that in a day and age when we worry about the Postal Service going from 6 day a week delivery to 5, right now, they're a 7 day a week operation. And I think there's reason to believe that they could grow even more. There are some who say rather than passing the sort of legislation that the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee has reported out on a bipartisan vote earlier this year, rather than do that, or some other alternative legislation, we should simply say to the Postal Service, you can't close any more mail processing centers for another year. And as it turns out, that's not going to give the Postal Service the money to do this, or frankly, the money that they can invest in any other number of new products that have the great potential of generating revenues and of enabling them to not just to be, open, or not just to remain alive, but to actually become vibrant and to be part of our growing economy in this country. So I want to close by saying I am, Mr. President, I'm more hopeful about the Postal Service than I've been in all the years I've worked on this as an issue. And as I talk to a number of my colleagues, I'm encouraged to hear from Democrats and Republicans that they want to be part of the solution. And they realize the idea of just leaving the Postal Service twisting in the wind for another year, that's not a good thing. And if we have a choice, the Postal Service has a choice to say, for us to say, don't close these 60 or 70 or 80 mail processing centers, that's not what they need. What they need is the kind of, for us to sort of not necessarily unleash them, but better ensure that they have the resources that they need to not just right-size the organization, but to modernize, to recapitalize the organization, and enable them to do things in the 21st century that actually build off their age-old delivery network, but to find new ways to make money doing so. So I wanted to, as we close out here today, and a lot of people are scattering to head back to their home states in anticipation of elections and that sort of thing, and to do other things, I just wanted to mention as we close here, a more hopeful note. a more hopeful note. And I want to say to members of our committee, and especially the presiding officer, thanks to you for trying to make sure that the Postal Service continues to be a linchpin within our economy, whether it happens to be Alaska or Delaware or even South Dakota over here. It was Senator Thune who's waiting for me to stop talking. We have the opportunity to be a big, important part of our economy going forward. And my hope is, and prayer is that's exactly what will enable them to do.